got my paper notes here.
Oh, good. She brought her notes. Yay. I'm here with
Old
Roxanne
school,
Barlick.
old school.
Even though we're talking about digital marketing, old school's always got a place, right? And
Well,
I'd like you to introduce yourself a little bit, Roxanne, and tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. And if I may interrupt first, I just want to thank you, Janet, for inviting me on here. I so admire how prolific and focused you are across so many different genres. And that's why I guess I feel like a soul sister with you, because going into my bio, same thing. I've had numerous careers. It's the benefit of being an older person. And so let's see a little bit about me. I'm co-owner of a company, Bare Feet Studios, with my partner, Shane Robinson. He started it about 15 years ago, maybe almost 20 years ago, digital software company, internet-based. And I, at the time, was a health coach for Johnson & Johnson and got offered a job as a marketing advisor. And I said, I'm not a marketing person. But the person who hired me said, you've had your own business for 20 years. I've watched you in action. You know marketing better than a lot of academic marketers. And so off I went, leaving the health field into marketing, internet, etc. I love the internet. I think it's the most spiritual place on the planet. This desire that we all have to be connected, not all of us, but this desire to be connected, the internet facilitates that in such automagic ways. And I just love it. So that just has, the internet's basically sucked me in for the last almost 20 years. So I've done a lot of web development, web software, marketing campaigns, love social media, have been blogging since Apple's One World thingamajiggy way back in the 90s. And underneath all of that has been this lifelong love of consciousness. So I would say that's really my true love in life. And I've kind of kept it in the closet and worked privately by myself, for myself. And just love that that's a topic that is so juicy right now. So I have I went to Berkeley for college, graduated in the 74. So was fortunate to be there at a time of great change, disruption, and still got that in my blood.
And now we seem to be going through kind of a backwards disruption, I think. We're seeing a lot of people that are going very old school. They're using actual paper to write on. But we're also seeing people that are saying, I'm not going to carry my smartphone with me during the day. We're seeing kind of a technology rejection and a movement towards being more one-on-one social and more aware. And I think that's what's really brought this mindfulness and business kind of full circle around. I mean, you can go back to John Kabat-Zinn, who really started working on this whole MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction for executives. But, now you're seeing companies like Google and Aetna and lots of smaller companies as well that are teaching mindfulness to their employees to help them kind of deal with the stresses of day-to-day work life. And my interest is really about how, yes, we can do that in our work life, but then how do we carry that over into marketing, and how does that apply? So what do you think about that? What's your take?
Well, I think that, I agree with what you've said. The internet's kind of like chocolate. It's this really wonderful thing, but, it takes a while to figure out, when you're overdosing on it. And, Arianna Huffington has been great. She was one of the first really high profile people to come out and say, yeah, I don't take my phone to the bed anymore. And I think that it's not so much, it's a lot of those individual practices. For me, it's very easy, especially with mindfulness as well as with social media. It's one thing I think they have in common, to look at it from aside, as an aside and see what makes sense. But it's really very different to apply it in one's own life, to apply it in one's own business. Because at its core, mindfulness believes that we're all, spiritual beings having a human experience, not the other way around. And that changes everything, literally. And I hardly ever use the words all or nothing, everything, never. But it means for me, for example, one of the things that I put in my blog post is it means being willing to abandon fear-based marketing. And that really, I think, is huge. All of the product, I think maybe not all of the ones I have seen of the product launch formulas that are so big right now in the information product space are about fear-based marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Find their point of pain, find their point of fear, lure them in with something that they can't. And it's that being snookered in the back brain sales methodology. And so if we're going to really, that for me is in conflict if you meditate for 30 minutes in the morning and then you go out and say, how can I trap people in their fears to buy my product?
Exactly.
You're allowed to do that. I'm not judging it, mind you. It's just for me. You help yourself. For me, that's not where I want to be.
Right.
I really want to be in customer relationships with people who are, wanting to act based on conscious desires, not on unconscious fears.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had a wonderful show with Ted Rubin last night, and I think he really epitomizes this, because if you talk to Ted anywhere on social media, he always responds, and he responds very mindfully and very thoughtfully. And then if you meet him in person, he's amazing. He's such an open and generous and very wonderful person. And it's really all about walking the talk. And I think that's the thing that, really is interesting to me, is that, yeah, we're saying we're being all mindful in the office, and, we're being conscious, and we're practicing metta and reaching out to the world. But then when we market, bam, there's a switch. Mm-hmm. And we have to figure out ways that we can incorporate that. And in social media marketing, I think it's easier because we're kind of led to think that we're here for relationships. We're not here just to make you scared and snooker your back brain.
Yes, I agree in general. And we have established these buzzwords of authenticity and truthfulness and, being allowed to show up with your flaws. And in fact, sometimes those posts are the ones that get the most traction because people can relate to the real person. And at the same time, social is putting this incredible pressure. I was doing a little bit of automatic writing just to prep for this conversation. And, one of the things that hit me is this pressure that people feel to share. People like myself, I have felt this pressure. I'm a natural sharer. Not everyone is. And so right away, there's two different ways of approaching marketing. Are you a natural sharer? Are you not? And where on that spectrum are you? Because that's going to give you a choice of 1,000 different options, for how to develop your marketing campaign. And for me, what I'm learning is that my monkey mind, my fear-based back brain, is pushing me a lot. You've got to be sharing. You're not on Snapchat enough. You're not on this. You're not on that. You're not on this. You've got to be out there all the time, every day. And I keep, my latest point of awareness is actually, no, I don't. There's a lot of noise out there. It's fine. But what I'm trying to get to is to really, be more and more and more finely tuned into sharing because it makes sense for me in this moment, and not feeling the pressure to have to share all the time.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's a challenge because as a consultant, I have to know all of these networks, and I do know them. But when it comes down to helping a brand understand, which of these channels do I really need to focus on, and which one is going to carry my true voice, and which is going to be the one where I'm going to find the people that I really want to connect with, instead of trying to broadcast, throw a wide net and hope that I catch somebody. It's that old concept of don't boil the ocean. You want to figure out who is on what networks, and are they talking about the things that really matter to them, that appeal to the things that I have to offer, and then using that generosity forward mentality as well, which marketers are beginning to pick up. You look at some of the ones like Zappos, for example, the marketers who really practice what they preach, but they also are a genuine voice through their social outlets. Even if it's, advocacy, for example.
Right. People are being more willing to expand this. What kind of it boils down to often for me is this notion of humanity. And, for so long, there were sort of like two things I think that developed for each person from the individual, point of view. As we built businesses over the many previous centuries, it's, you have to not be who you are, but you have to produce what you think the market wants. And you also can't show who you really are, because, there's this feeling that so many people have, just that core human experience that we're flawed, that has just come as part of this territory that we're really breaking up right now. And that then leads to, well, then my business, what do I do with my business? Well, my business has to put lipstick on the pig and make this thing that we think other people want, and we hide the flaws of that, because our business becomes our survival. If I can't sell my products, I can't make money. And then the way the back brain thinks about that is, well, then I'll die. And so literally, we don't think that when we're sitting in a meeting, but that is the energy that is under the table in a meeting when a company is planning strategy, when a company is looking at their quarterly numbers, when a company is, deciding to expand or contract. And without naming that energy, and without, allowing practices to really out that energy and say, well, wait a minute, is that really true? Am I flawed? Well, no. Do I have neuroses? Yes. Does everyone? Yes.
Yes.
Can I put my neuroses on the table so that you, my business partner, knows I'm really weak in this area? Can you cover for me in that? And then vice versa. To me, that's a very specific, practical way to bring mindfulness into a business relationship. Of not hiding your fears or your flaws, but letting them be a part of the relationship, so that, rising tide floats all boats.
Right. Well, and isn't it a lot harder to hide those flaws now, when everything is transparent? Whether we want it to be transparent or not, it's really pretty transparent that your customers and your competitors will come out with things that may put you in a negative light, or may point out your flaws. And so we have to deal with those things, right out in public. And sometimes that's really a challenge, but sweeping them under the rug is no longer an option. So we have to think of a way to do that intelligently and with some heart. Right.
Well, and I think that starts with us. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And, one of the things, I know we both were at the Wisdom 2.0 conference, and it was so great having the CEO of LinkedIn, in his keynote, because he really role modeled that, being totally relaxed with who he is, and the feedback that he's getting from his employees was quite remarkable. Telling of that, I don't remember all the details. People can watch the videos of his interview, but
I'll link to the videos.
It really, and I think this is the most, if there were any takeaway, I would say, start within. That's where each person's power is. And it really won't, I mean, for a person like me who is so in love with consciousness, the universe really smacks me down all the time when I try to apply it out there and I'm not applying it in here. And, you know, that's the good news, not the bad news, though sometimes it creates a bit of pain. Okay. And so that's the big thing, you know, and that's what's so easy, you know, so part of the ground rules I have is no complaining.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's another really specific thing, to go into a meeting and have an agreement. We're not going to complain. Everything that we think is wrong, that should be changed, that we failed at, that whatever, we're going to reframe how we talk about that, because our language is so powerful. Mm-hmm. And it's the one thing that we literally have on the tip of our tongues and at the tip of our fingers all day, every day. And the more we can just breathe, slow down a little bit, rewrite that email, restate how we're looking at the problem. Mm-hmm. You know, one way that I practice that a lot is people, especially of my age, complain so much, you know, the kids are always on their phone, the kids are always texting, it's terrible, they're not going to know, blah, 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 blah. Even on the topic of etiquette, which is something that I'm really a fan of, they don't know how to be polite, they don't learn respect, this and that and the other. You know, you can say all of that, but all that does is suck the energy. Mm-hmm. And instead reframe it of, well, wonder what, you know, with this open-ended question, wonder what the universe has in store for us. You know, I wonder how they're going to learn to balance these things, because they're growing up with this stuff from a very early age that we've had to kind of overlay onto who we are. Mm-hmm. Me, I'm in my 60s. And so looking at things as an opportunity, looking at it from curiosity instead of criticism, those are very practical, mindful ways. Drafting an email. I need that thing, blah, 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 blah. I don't need it. It is not, my survival is not dependent on your sales report. I would like it by such and such a time, so I can include your numbers in my thing that is going out at such and such a time. Mm-hmm. And then it's like those little things, incrementally, they add up. You know, the more and more we can use language in that really supportive, open-ended way, it literally mechanically opens up the energy, so there's a flow between the people who are communicating. When we use this hard language, you know, I need this from you. Mm-hmm. And if that receiver is already got 5 I need from you emails, the tendency is to just want to shut down, you know, for many, many people, or to just fight so hard that they burn out and then they're of no use to anyone. So using language, practicing, you know, rather than preaching, it's like that just came to me. I can be very preachy, and I'm really trying to leave that behind and just live it instead of talking about it. Mm-hmm. So maybe, you know, practice instead of preaching is the new version of practice what you preach. You know, yeah. None of us need to be preached at. Yeah. Let's just put that one to rest.
Well, I think that's the language is so important, and the language that we use in messaging when we're creating marketing documents, for example, you know, we tend to use imperative just because we want them to know how badly they need it, where that can often bounce. You know, as marketers ourselves, we see that all the time, and we read things not to read the message of what they're trying to sell us as much as to how they're selling it and how that works, because it's kind of a game. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, I've been a salesperson, I guess, most of my life too. And when I go into, we'll say a car lot, because that's the usual example. Yeah. But, you know, you go into a car lot, if someone comes to me and says, hey, how are you today? Instead of what do you want? Or what car can I sell you now? Mm-hmm. It's a completely different method. Mm-hmm. And it works on me. And I like a good salesperson, and I will probably buy from them simply because they're a good salesperson. I think the same is true in marketing. When you have a warmer approach and you're not trying to shove something down my throat, I'm at least going to take the moment to listen to your message, whereas I might not if I feel like you're trying to force me to buy something.
I agree. And what you described, the way that I heard it, is it's about the process. And the nice thing about being focused on process instead of product is that it is adjustable in every single present moment of time. So, and I think that's another skill for marketers. If we, and this is what I have learned from mindfulness, be here now. Ram Dass, coined the 3 most powerful collection of words. Be here now. That's really all there is. We can argue about what happened yesterday, and we can pretend to know what will happen tomorrow, and we'll be right some of the time and we'll be wrong some of the time. What we have is right now. And if we're willing as marketers to, have a plan, have some ideas, get it ready to roll it out, and then really be present in the moment. And that only comes when we've practiced that skill of being in the present and trusting being in the present. And that's, again, where the meditation and the mindfulness practices really have a direct impact. To a person who isn't practicing and hasn't experienced the safety and the calm and the inspiration that shows up in these quiet moments, more times than not, I think has a more difficult time noticing the subtler signals of what's taking place in the marketing relationship as it's developing. So good news, if you are sitting in the present, looking in the present, not worrying about the future, not thinking about the past and letting that fear drive you, it just opens up all kinds of things for that process of being in relationship with customers.
Well, it's interesting. I get asked a lot, do I have to meditate to be mindful? And my answer is no, you don't. It's not something that you have to do, but what it does is make it 10, 20, 100 times more powerful to you and a lot easier to find that space. You can take mindful moments, for example. One of the apps that I like is Buddhify, and Buddhify has a short little video clip, and they say, if you're sitting at your desk, just blink. And in that few seconds that it takes, stop and think, and then go on with your day. And what that does is just bring you to the present moment for just that 1 second. And if you do that throughout the day, you find those things that you realize that you're actually, wow, I'm in the present. I'm not thinking about the past. I'm not thinking about the future. I'm not freaking out about anything. I'm actually just here. That it helps you root, it helps you focus, it helps you center. And that's where you could start. Eventually, we'll pour you the virtual Kool-Aid and you'll start meditating, because it really is something that opens a lot of doors for you and helps you stay centered. But I don't want everybody to think that in order to practice mindfulness, you have to meditate, because it scares the hell out of a lot of people.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think anybody has to do anything. A story that I've told a few times, maybe this will be the last time I tell it, but I was at a 100-hour yoga teacher certification course back in the 90s. And, we were all loving it. We were completely immersed in the experience. And at lunch, people started talking, and, the chatter was, oh, if only everyone in the world did yoga, imagine how the world would be. And, I did my sort of buzzkill rocks, and I just said, I don't really think everyone in the world needs to do yoga, because that is the beauty of humanity, is this incredible diversity, and everyone is different. For some people, high intensity exercise really throws them off. And I learned that, years before, when I used to be an aerobic instructor, and I thought everyone should do aerobics to live happily ever after. But I learned, no, not everyone should. Some people do much better with quietude. Some people do much better with high intensity exercise and everything in between. So I think the only thing for mindfulness really is this word pause. Just being willing to pause. However you want to do that, whenever you want to do it, as often as you want to do it, just try the pause. For me, adding a little breathing in there is, like the power formula for pause. Because the nature of our being will take care of the rest of it. And then going into meditation, or then going into this or going into that, those become options for people to explore, or prayer, or contemplative anything, walking, typing.
Yeah, and everybody has their own mix. If you're a cyclist, you're very often very focused on what you're doing at that time, but you're also enjoying the world around you, and thinking about the bigger picture. But it all depends. We all have different ways of finding a way to focus and take that pause, and take a mindful moment just to be there.
Right.
And the more you can build those in, the better. To me, the way that appeals to, like you were saying earlier with the email, with marketing messages, for example, just thinking before you respond, just stop. Because it's very easy to do knee-jerk responses through social media. You can see a tweet and respond to it in a second and realize that you've misinterpreted what the people on the other end thought, or that you have responded in a way that maybe wasn't appropriate, or maybe didn't answer the question that was really being asked. Because we can't always know what those questions are without giving it a little thought, or maybe even asking for clarification. So there's a lot of things that you can do in that way that increase your communication level and decrease your canned responses. I'm a big advocate of losing the canned responses.
Right. I agree. We can't stand them when we get them. So
right.
But it is, I think it's worth, pausing here and just acknowledging that we've had centuries and centuries and centuries of neurological, mechanical programming of our mind-body complex to respond, to fear in certain ways based on survival instincts. And, I think that's why a lot of the work that I do is about helping people separate literally their back brain from their forebrain, or what I like to call the adult consciousness and the kid consciousness, or what some people call instinct, which is the old versus consciousness. There's a lot of different ways to think about those two aspects of our being. And when we have that fear response, and we let the kid, or the monkey mind, as the Buddhists call it, or instinct, do the responding, we're just basically opening the carton of milk and pouring it on the floor. That is a mess in the making. And for me, I really like frameworks. That's part of coming from a software background, and the way my brain works as a bit of a systems analyst. I like these frameworks where I can say, oh, kid me really wants to tear into that person because they are wrong. But adult me can come in and say, well, what's that really going to get you? And as you said, what's that person really trying to ask? And that's where that curiosity, being curious rather than critical, comes in. Well, if my survival isn't on the line, wonder what's going on with them. How can I be of help? Do I need to ignore that and let them have their thing and then come back later? We always have so many more options in the moment than the back brain thinks. And again, the back brain is small, it's tiny, it's instinctual. It hasn't had all of these consciousness software upgrades that our adult selves have had. and that many of which are acquired through sitting quietly and through pausing. It's like, oh, that is when these aha moments show up. They also show up, riding, at your maximum speed on your bike. It doesn't have to be physical and mental and emotional pause. It really, and this is something else that's just coming to me right now, it's just kind of like pausing one of our systems is enough to create space for that aha to come in.
Yeah, I like that a lot, creating the space for the aha to come in and actually being able to respond. And we are prey animals. We respond to flight or fight. And which are we going to do right now? But if we could just stop for a second and realize that we aren't being treated as prey at this particular moment in time, and really give it some thought, because the responses can be so knee-jerk and so the negative response that you make right now in that second before you stop to think reflects on you for a very long time, because it's taken out of context at some point later through social. And the thing is that even though we think of social media as this immediate environment, no one is going to die if you don't respond to a tweet in a few seconds or in a few minutes or even in a few hours. If you have to go collect data, if you have to talk to somebody, if you have to just take a breath before you respond, then you can do that and be much more thoughtful and much more positive, and interact with that person in a way that is really going to make a difference for them too, because people really respond when you respond generously and kindly to someone online. But if you snap off that response, that's going to be maybe a little less better received.
Right. So my kid mind, my monkey mind, was listening to you. And she jumped in and she said, well, no, there are times when you have to respond to a tweet and someone could die. Didn't you hear that story of that person that was in that prison and blah, 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 blah. And so, I say to her, yeah, that's a good example. But what Janet is saying is that most of the time, and again, it takes consciousness to be able to discern, is this critical? Is this not critical? So that's another aspect of, building the skills that I think are required to make us really rock star marketers in this day and age. And one of those skills is discernment. And if you let the back brain do the discerning, that's the metaphorical pouring the milk on the floor. You're making the mess for yourself versus what you're saying. By all means, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, it isn't a life-threatening situation.
I think that's something that we can all take from this too, is that using words like always and never and, those kind of things that really define everything as an absolute really aren't true.
No,
most of the time.
That really, the way I think of it, I actually wrote an ebook on this, so maybe I'll put a little plug in there because I'm so bad at that for myself. I wrote an ebook called The 3 U's, which is about soul you, which is this divine inspiration that is available 24/7, adult you, which is your functional human consciousness, and kid you, which is basically the back brain, the little version of us. And the alls and the nevers and the nothings and the musts and the have tos and the gotchas and the black and white, that is the realm of the kid aspect that each of us has. And so it's one of the easiest ways, I think, to identify, oh, that's kid me talking. And then be able to engage, well, does the kid have anything reasonable to say or not? Most of the time it's like, oh, you're worried about that? I got this handled, sweetheart. I know that seems really hard for you. You're a little back brain kid monkey mind. But for me, this all-powerful adult consciousness who is holding the hand of my soul, we got this covered. And it's another one of the reasons. Thank you for making that point. It's one of the things I love about language, because wow, there's like 10 words or so that are instant wake ups. Oh, let me have my pause here.
And I think there
It's
are
a great
words
one.
too that are instant lockups. And one of them, some of them obviously are always, never, must.
Right,
You know,
right, right.
those kind of things just, they put up a wall right away, and figuring out how we can use those words less, which I'm not very good at yet.
We're all
Can help.
practicing. This is all so new, you know?
That's why
And
we
it's
call it practice.
exactly.
So, Roxanne, if you were going to give advice to someone who is in marketing and really wants to expand a little bit and practice mindfulness in some small way, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, I'm thinking that for this audience of people who are watching this, you know, they're probably more techie than not. I would say to get an app, because you've got your phone with you all the time anyway. And so why not start using technology to support these habits you want to build, rather than letting it suck you down that rat hole of, you know, worrying about everyone else in the world is doing. I wrote a blog post on it. You mentioned Buddhify. I've been a user of Insight Timer for the last 7 or 8 months. I discovered it last summer. I love that. It's kind of an old-fashioned app in a lot of ways. There are guided meditations and things in there, but mostly I just use it to have the gong sounds for starting and ending my silent meditations. And so that's an awesome app, Insight Timer, at Insight Timer.
Actually, I found that one through you because you tweet every time you use it.
Yeah, so it has this, it's a San Francisco developer that it's recently been bought by 2 other guys who live in Bali.
Nice.
Anyway, so it's kind of infused, even though the interface is kind of old school, PC-ish looking. There's nothing glamorous about the interface of the app, but it just works, you know. It's just, it does what I want it to do, and it does have some social features built in that I can automate. And I like that. One of the reasons I like that app is I like meditating with other people. But I don't want to have to go anywhere. So I get to meditate with other people virtually, and there is definitely an amplification of the vibe when you are going into a quiet space with more than one person, more than one soul. And so, yeah, I have mine on, it sets to, you know, I'm starting a X minute meditation, come and join me. Another one is Calm, calm.com or at Calm. It's a beautiful web-based interface and also an iPhone app that does many of these similar things. A lot of times when I'm going to be doing my automatic writing, which is a type of channeling really, I will put full screen on my big monitor, calm.com, set the timer, and it has music and the animated GIFs screen that's beautiful. And I find it's a wonderful backdrop for creating a physical space for me. My partner Shane uses Headspace, which is also a very popular app. Tim Ferriss, I think, was really instrumental in helping to get that out to the tech community. It can also be used just as a timer, but it's much, I think, weighted in the opposite fashion of Insight Timer, in that it's really designed to teach you how to meditate. And so you can just relax and stop researching and just show up and let Headspace show you the way.
And it's good to mention with Headspace in particular that they have a 10-day free program that actually kind of teaches you the basics of meditation. And you can go into it deeper and you can do a lot of different things with it, but it gives you an opportunity to kind of get the feel of what this all is. And you don't have to do it for an hour. You can do small segments at a time of 10 minutes and really get an idea of what it's like. And I like with all of these apps that in the guided meditations anyway, it's very, they all kind of say, if you've got a monkey brain, if your brain's jumping around, don't worry about it. Just bring it back. And I think that's the biggest thing that I hear from people is, oh, I can never meditate because my mind is always going.
Right.
So is everybody else.
That is a kid's version of meditation.
Mm.
A kid thinks meditation, oh, silent mind, no thoughts, bliss, because that's really all the kid can process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but anyone that's ever meditated, you realize when you get those moments, yeah, that is bliss. And it's an incentive to keep coming back. But the benefits are, and that's where John Kabat-Zinn has been so useful. He's a medical doctor, and he's done, I mean, the latest study report that he released a couple of months ago is so phenomenal on the physiological benefits. There's this cascade of all of these other things that are these gifts that show up, unpredictable, unexpected gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a very meta experience, because as you stop your judgments of yourself, the easier it is for the mind to relax. And it's a very self-reinforcing kind of experience, which I love, and to me, that is the metaphor for life. When I stop judging myself, things get easier. If I'm finding that I'm having a hard day, let me reverse engineer that. Okay, where am I being hard on myself? And that's where my kid shows up. I mean, I recently read a book, Mindset, Carol Dwyer, Stanford psychologist. And even though I'm like this huge Pollyanna optimist, most people like, enough with it, Roxanne. My kid is not that way. She is on me 24/7. And I noticed after just the first day of reading the book, I only read the introduction before I fell asleep. I noticed when I woke up the next morning, my self-talk, I'm tired. You didn't get enough sleep. You stayed up too late. You should have gone to bed earlier. You're going to have a terrible day because you didn't get enough sleep. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I haven't even gotten out of bed yet. And you've got it all figured out. And right then I just said, wait a minute, I can change this right now. And it just, now that hearing myself say that, it's like, well, that's dumb, of course. But how many times, how many moments we have a chance, moment after moment after moment after moment, all day long, to have that conversation with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a muscle building. Yeah, that's where the pause comes in. Wait a minute. I don't want to feel like crap all day. That's your opinion. I'm jumping out of bed right now. I can't wait to get in the pool. That's going to vibe me up. And, I'm in charge of my day. And what a shift in the energy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would like to leave everyone with that thought, that if they could just think through, after you've listened to this, just stop and listen to your own self for a minute and see who's really talking to you. And is that really your best friend? And is that somebody that you want to go through the rest of the day with? Or are you going to change things?
Yeah. Put that kid in a timeout, or send them to the beach and let them play.
Paint a little corner on your desk.
Yeah.
Well, Roxanne, this has been really fun. And I'd love for you to tell people how they can find you and learn more about you.
Great. Well, I'm on Twitter at Roxanne Darling, and most other places at Roxanne Darling. My company website is barefeetstudios.com. My personal blog, which is where I used to hide all my woo-woo stuff, which is where you can also find my ebook, The 3 U's, is inthetransition.com. And that's directly speaking to the transition in consciousness that's taking place in my life.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. It was delightful to be here. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, well, it's been really fun.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. And stay tuned. We'll put this up on the podcast. You can also find it on Google+. You can find it on YouTube. And you can also find it on Spreaker, which is where I host my podcast. Oh, and SoundCloud. We're everywhere.
Yes.
Stay tuned.
Thank you. Aloha.